The day my son packed my suitcase, he smiled. Not because he was happy, because he believed he was doing the right thing. I smiled back, not because I agreed, because I had no idea that, within a few days, my late husband's final decision would change everything. My name is Margaret Collins. I'm 72 years old, and until recently, I believed the hardest part of growing old was losing the people you love. I was wrong. The hardest part is watching the people you love slowly stop listening to you. It started on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was trimming roses in the front yard when Daniel pulled into the driveway, my only son. He climbed out of his SUV carrying 2 coffees, just like he always did. For a moment, everything felt normal. "Morning, Mom." "Morning." He kissed my forehead and handed me a cup. We sat on the porch, watching squirrels chase each other across Richard's old maple tree. After a minute, Daniel cleared his throat. "I've been thinking." Whenever someone starts with those words, something bad usually follows. "I don't think you should be living here alone anymore." I looked at him. "I've lived here for 42 years. "I know. But things change." I smiled. "They do. I planted those roses with your father. I buried our dog under that oak tree. You learned to ride your bike in this driveway. I think I'll manage another year." He didn't smile. Instead, he reached into his jacket and placed a glossy brochure on the table. Maple Grove Senior Living. I didn't touch it. "What's this?" "A place I'd like you to visit." "I don't." "You haven't even looked." "I don't need to." His voice remained calm. "It's not a nursing home. It's beautiful. They have gardens, a library, activities." I looked him straight in the eyes. "I already have a garden. My library is inside. And I still know how to keep myself busy." For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he quietly asked, "Don't you ever get lonely?" That question hurt more than I expected. "I miss your father every day." But missing someone isn't the same as giving up your home. Daniel stared into his coffee. "I just worry." "I know. And I love you for worrying. But worrying doesn't give you permission to make my decisions." He nodded slowly. At least, I thought he understood. I couldn't have been more wrong. 3 days later, Daniel came back. This time, he wasn't alone. His wife, Rebecca, stepped out of the SUV, carrying another stack of brochures. She greeted me with a bright smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Hi, Margaret." "Rebecca." We sat in the living room. Neither of them had come for coffee. Daniel got straight to the point. "We made an appointment." "For what?" "Maple Grove." "I already told you my answer." Rebecca leaned forward. "Just one visit. That's all we're asking." I said no. "It's only an hour." "No." Daniel sighed. "Mom." I raised my hand. "My answer hasn't changed." Rebecca opened one of the brochures anyway. "Private suites, restaurant-style dining, medical staff 24 hours a day." She sounded like she was selling a vacation. I closed the brochure. "I'm not buying." Silence settled over the room. Finally, Daniel stood. "We're only trying to help." I walked them to the front door. Before leaving, Rebecca quietly said, "Sometimes people don't realize they need help until it's too late." I watched their SUV disappear down the street. For the first time in years, my own home didn't feel completely safe anymore. Because I had seen something in Daniel's eyes. Not anger, Not impatience, determination. And I suddenly realized something that made my stomach turn. He wasn't asking anymore. He was making a plan. The next week, I came home from the grocery store and immediately knew something was wrong. The front door was unlocked. I was certain I had locked it. Hello? No answer. I stepped inside. 3 cardboard boxes sat in the hallway. Each one was neatly labeled: kitchen, bedroom, books. My heart began to race. Then I heard voices: Daniel and Rebecca. They walked out of my bedroom carrying one of Richard's old blankets. What are you doing? Both of them froze. Daniel forced a smile. We're helping you get organized. I didn't ask for help. Rebecca carefully placed the blanket into a box. We thought it would make the move easier. What move? The one to Maple Grove. I stared at them. I never agreed to move. Daniel stepped closer. We're trying to prepare before it becomes an emergency. I picked up the blanket and held it tightly. Richard and I had shared that blanket for 20 years. This isn't preparation. This is packing. Daniel looked exhausted. Mom, please. You almost fell last month. I tripped over a garden hose. What if next time it's worse? What if I break a hip? What if no one's here? I looked at him quietly. So this is about fear. It's about keeping you safe. No, it's about making yourself feel safe. The room fell silent. Rebecca broke it. We're thinking about your future. My future isn't yours to organize. I carried the blanket back to the bedroom. One by one, I unpacked every box they had filled. Neither of them tried to stop me. When they finally left, the house felt strangely empty. Not because they were gone, because trust had quietly left with them. 3 days later, my neighbor Carol knocked on my door. She looked nervous. Margaret, I hope I'm wrong. What happened? I saw a real estate photographer here yesterday. I blinked. A photographer? Carol nodded. They were taking pictures of your house. They measured the backyard. I assumed you'd decided to sell. Sell? Nobody had mentioned selling. Not to me. I thanked Carol, closed the door, and immediately called Daniel. He answered after the second ring. Hi, Mom. Why was there a photographer at my house? Silence. Finally, he spoke. I was only getting information. For what? In case you decide to move. You photographed my home before I even agreed? I was planning ahead. No. You were deciding for me. His voice became firmer. I'm trying to help. I took a deep breath. Help begins with asking, not assuming. Neither of us spoke again. Then, he ended the call. The following Monday, someone knocked at my door. A woman in a navy blazer smiled politely. Mrs. Collins? Yes? My name is Susan Harper. I'm a senior care coordinator. My stomach tightened. I think you've got the wrong house. No, ma'am. Your son asked me to visit. Of course he did. She asked if she could come inside. Against my better judgment, I let her. She complimented the house. Then the questions began. Did I drive? Did I cook? Did I forget appointments? Had I fallen recently? Did I take medication? At first, they sounded harmless. Then I realized what she was doing. She wasn't visiting me. She was evaluating me. When she finally stood to leave, I asked one question. Do you think I belong in assisted living? She hesitated. I don't make those decisions. Who does? She lowered her eyes. Usually, the family. After she left, I sat alone in the kitchen for nearly an hour. The coffee in front of me had gone cold. For the first time since Richard died, I felt like I was losing more than my husband. I was losing my voice. And deep inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. 2 days later, my phone rang just after breakfast. The caller ID showed a name I hadn't seen in years. Harper and Lewis Attorneys, Richard's law firm. For a moment, I simply stared at the screen before answering. Mrs. Collins? Yes? My name is Andrew Lewis. We represented your husband. My heart skipped. There are a few documents Mr. Collins asked us to keep until the appropriate time. I'd like to meet with you. What kind of documents? I'm afraid I can't discuss them over the phone. When? As soon as possible. The office looked exactly as I remembered. Dark wood shelves, old leather chairs, family photographs on the walls. Andrew Lewis greeted me with a warm smile. Richard spoke about you often. I smiled sadly. He always talked too much. Andrew chuckled. Not about you. About how proud he was. Those words caught me off guard. He opened a drawer and placed a sealed envelope on the desk. My breath caught. Richard's handwriting. Across the front were 5 words. For Margaret, if necessary. I found another envelope at home, I whispered. I never opened it. Andrew nodded. Richard thought you wouldn't. He knew you well. I carefully broke the seal. The first line blurred through my tears before I even finished reading it. My dearest Maggie. It felt as though Richard was sitting across from me. His calm voice echoed in my mind. If you're reading this, something has gone wrong. You probably spent weeks trying to keep everyone happy. That's who you've always been. I smiled through my tears. That sounded exactly like him. Then I turned the page. If Daniel ever begins treating you like a responsibility instead of his mother. I froze. Every word after that became harder to read. Remember this. Growing older never takes away your right to choose your own life. No one, not even family, has the right to make those choices for you. By now, tears were falling freely. Richard had written this years ago, long before any of this had happened, almost as if he had seen it coming. Andrew quietly slid another folder across the desk. There's something else. Inside was a copy of Richard's final will. One paragraph had been highlighted. If Margaret Collins is ever placed into assisted living against her wishes, the family home shall immediately be donated to the Liberty Veterans Foundation. I looked up in disbelief. What? Andrew folded his hands. Richard added that clause after his heart attack. He wanted to make sure no one could pressure you into leaving your home. And Daniel? If that clause is triggered, he receives nothing from the house. I couldn't speak. Richard hadn't tried to punish our son. He had simply protected me, even after he was gone. I drove home in silence. Richard's letter rested on the passenger seat beside me. Every stoplight gave me another excuse to read one more sentence. A home isn't measured by its market value. It's measured by the life built inside it. By the time I reached my driveway, I knew what I had to do. That evening, I called Daniel. We need to talk. His voice sounded hopeful. Did you finally decide to visit Maple Grove? No. But I found something your father left behind. There was a long pause. I'll come over. Bring Rebecca. We'll be there. As I hung up the phone, I looked toward Richard's photograph above the fireplace. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel afraid. Because I knew something Daniel didn't. Tomorrow, everything was about to change. The next evening, Daniel and Rebecca arrived together. Rebecca walked in first. She smiled politely, as if expecting good news. So, have you changed your mind? I didn't answer. Instead, I placed Richard's letter on the dining room table. Daniel frowned. Dad wrote this? I nodded. He wanted you to read it. The room fell silent. Daniel unfolded the pages. At first, his expression didn't change. Then he reached the second page. His eyes slowed. His breathing changed. Rebecca leaned closer. What does it say? Daniel didn't answer. He kept reading. When he reached the final page, his hands were shaking. He carefully placed the letter back on the table. Dad knew. His voice cracked. He knew this could happen. I looked at him. He knew people make mistakes when they're afraid. Rebecca frowned. What are you talking about? Without saying a word, I handed her a copy of Richard's will. She quickly found the highlighted paragraph. The color drained from her face. This can't be legal. It is, I replied quietly. If I'm forced into assisted living against my wishes, this house goes to the Liberty Veterans Foundation. Rebecca looked at Daniel in disbelief. And us? Daniel answered before I could. We get nothing. The room became completely silent. Rebecca stood up so quickly, her chair slid across the floor. This is insane. He can't punish us from the grave. I remained calm. He isn't punishing anyone. He's protecting me. She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped, because deep down, she knew I was right. Daniel stared at his father's signature for what felt like forever. Finally, he whispered, I never wanted your house. I gently asked, then why did you have it photographed? He closed his eyes. I thought selling it would pay for the best care. You never asked if I wanted that care. I know. I thought I already knew the answer. And did you? He slowly shook his head. No. For the first time since this all began, I saw my son instead of a man trying to solve a problem. His shoulders slumped, his confidence disappeared. I've been terrified since Dad died. He looked at me. I kept imagining getting a phone call. Your mother fell. Your mother is alone. I convinced myself that making the decision for you was the same as protecting you. A tear rolled down his cheek. I was wrong. I reached across the table and took his hand. You weren't wrong for worrying. You were wrong for forgetting to ask me. He nodded. I know. I'm sorry, Mom. Those 3 words carried more weight than anything else he had said. Rebecca quietly sat back down. She looked at the family photographs covering the living room wall. There was Richard holding Daniel as a little boy, Christmas mornings, birthdays, camping trips, dozens of ordinary moments. I've been looking at this house all wrong. She spoke so softly, I almost didn't hear her. I only saw what it was worth. She looked around the room. You saw your life. I smiled sadly. Exactly. For the first time, Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Margaret. I truly am. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was honest. And sometimes, that's enough to begin healing. Before leaving, Daniel reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a set of papers, the Maple Grove contracts. Without saying a word, he tore them in half, then again, and again. The pieces fell into the trash. No more decisions without you. He looked me in the eyes. I promise. As I watched him walk toward the front door, I realized something. Richard's letter hadn't saved my house. It had saved my son. And for the first time in weeks, I believed our family still had a future. A week passed. For the first time in months, no one mentioned Maple Grove. No brochures arrived in the mail. No unexpected visitors knocked on my door. The silence felt different, peaceful. Then, one Saturday morning, Daniel called. Mom, would you like to have lunch? There was no hidden agenda, no discussion waiting at the end of the meal, just lunch. We met at the little diner where Richard and I used to stop after church every Sunday. Daniel smiled as I walked in. A real smile. The kind I hadn't seen since he was young. For nearly 2 hours, we talked about everything except the house. His children, my garden, Richard's terrible fishing jokes. We laughed, really laughed. It felt like finding a missing piece of my family again. Rebecca didn't come that day, but 3 weeks later, she stood on my porch, holding a small rose bush. I wasn't sure you'd open the door. I wasn't sure either, I admitted. She looked down at the plant in her hands. I owe you an apology. I invited her inside. We sat in the living room where so many difficult conversations had taken place. This house, she looked around slowly. I only saw numbers. I never saw the memories. She glanced toward Richard's photograph above the fireplace. I understand now. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I was wrong. I reached for the rose bush. It's beautiful. Richard had always believed flowers deserved a chance to grow. Maybe people did too. Together, we planted it beside the front porch. Every spring after that, it bloomed. A quiet reminder that broken relationships can heal when people choose humility over pride. By summer, Sunday afternoons became a family tradition again. Daniel and Rebecca brought the grandchildren every weekend. The house filled with laughter. Toy cars rolled across the living room floor. Cookie crumbs somehow appeared in every corner of the kitchen. One afternoon, my oldest grandson looked up at Richard's picture. Grandma, was Grandpa nice? I smiled. He was the kindest man I've ever known. The little boy nodded. I think he'd like it here today. I looked around the room. Everyone was talking at once. Rebecca was helping in the kitchen. Daniel was fixing the loose porch step Richard had always meant to repair. The children were chasing each other through the backyard. Yes, I whispered. I think he would. A month later, Andrew Lewis called. I wanted to tell you something. What is it? I've handled hundreds of wills, but your husband's was different. Why? He wasn't trying to control the future. He was protecting your right to choose it. I smiled. That sounds like Richard. Andrew laughed softly. He also left one final note in our file. My heart skipped. Another one? Just one sentence. He read it aloud. The greatest inheritance a parent can leave isn't a house. It's teaching their children how to love when life becomes difficult. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Because Richard had been right. The house had never been the real inheritance. The lesson was. Today, I'm 72 years old. Every morning begins the same way. I make a cup of coffee, I open the kitchen curtains, and I watch the sunlight fall across Richard's garden. The tomatoes still grow beside the fence. The old maple tree still shades the porch, and the house still feels like home. The only difference is, I'm no longer afraid of losing it. Not because of a clause in a will, but because my family finally understands what this place truly means. Daniel visits almost every Saturday now. Sometimes he mows the lawn. Sometimes he fixes something around the house. Sometimes we simply sit on the porch with 2 cups of coffee, just like we used to. One afternoon, he looked at me and quietly said, I spent months trying to save you. I smiled. I know. But I forgot to ask what you wanted. Yes. I did. He nodded. I'll never make that mistake again. That promise meant more to me than any document Richard had ever signed. Rebecca changed too. Not overnight. Real change never happens overnight. Little by little, she stopped talking about property values and retirement plans. Instead, she asked me for gardening advice. She learned Richard's recipes. She even framed one of our old family photographs and gave it to me for Christmas. When she handed me the gift, she smiled and said, I finally understand why this house matters. I hugged her. Not because everything had been forgotten, but because forgiveness always begins with understanding. One warm autumn evening, the whole family gathered in the backyard. The grandchildren were chasing fireflies. Daniel was grilling hamburgers. Rebecca was setting the table on the patio. For a moment, I closed my eyes. The laughter, the smell of fresh grass, the sound of children playing. It reminded me of the life Richard and I had built together. I looked toward his favorite chair on the porch. It was empty, but somehow, it didn't feel empty. It felt like he was still part of all of this, quietly watching over the family he loved so deeply. Before everyone left that evening, my oldest grandson slipped his small hand into mine. Grandma? Yes, sweetheart? Will this house always be here? I looked around. The porch, the garden, the maple tree. Then I looked at my family. And I realized something. A home isn't a building. It's the people who choose to keep coming back. I smiled at him. As long as we take care of each other, it will always be here. He smiled, satisfied with the answer only a child could fully believe. Every night before I go to bed, I pause in front of Richard's photograph. I still talk to him. Some habits never leave us. I miss you, I whisper. Thank you. Not for the house, not for the will, not even for the letter. I thank him because he reminded us of something we had almost forgotten. Growing older does not mean giving up your dignity. Love does not mean making someone else's choices. And family isn't measured by what you inherit. It's measured by how you treat one another while you still have the chance. If Richard had left us money alone, our family might have fallen apart. Instead, he left us wisdom. And in the end, that became the greatest inheritance of all.